This is the Public Health Administration lecture for 2026. It is a lecture that will touch upon topics that are not just in health, not just in public health in general, but also it will touch upon the foundations of our society, how we are governed, the social contract. So it's a mixture of social sciences slash political science and public administration and how it impacts health. Okay. If you feel overwhelmed with this lecture, understand that it is a lifelong discipline. Okay. Um, there are people who have been in the field for years, even decades, and they will say that they are not even experts, just practitioners, because it requires a lot of nuance. So at the end of this session, the student should be able to identify the elements and concerns of health administration, understand the application and principles of management to the health system, enumerate the different managerial functions with regards to the health system, identify the different types of local health systems, and give examples of an effective health system. Additionally, you should be able to identify any knowledge gaps and perform self-directed learning. This lecture will have a multitude of uh, topics for discussion, and if you feel like it's overwhelming, that's all right. Health administration isn't learned in one day. This is basically a primer on what public health administration is. So before we look at public health administration specifically, let's go to the social contract that we have as a nation state, which is the 1987 Philippine Constitution, where Article 2, Section 5 says that the state is responsible for the protection of life, liberty, and property and the promotion of general welfare. And Article 2, Section 15, the state shall protect and promote the right to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them. And Article 13, Sections 11 and 12, uh, the state will adopt an integrated and comprehensive approach to health development, giving priority for the needs of the underprivileged, sick, elderly, disabled, women, and children, and endeavor to provide free medical care to paupers, as well as maintain an effective food and drug regulatory system and undertake appropriate health manpower development and research responsive to the country's health needs and problems. So now that we've discussed the social contract, i.e. our constitution and what it's supposed to perform, let's do a quick review of our governance. So what are the three branches of government? As you already know, it is the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And which branch of the government implements our healthcare policy and regulations? Of course, it is the um, executive branch. So in this case, well, this is supposed to be um, the White House, but imagine it's Malacanang Palace. Okay, I couldn't find a cartoon or a comic version of Malacanang Palace. Okay, and the branch that makes the proposal for the health budget, of course, is still uh, the executive branch through the Department of Health, together with the Department of Budget and Management. But the branch that approves of the health budget is the legislative through our upper house, the Senate, and the lower house, the House of Representatives. They do this in the form of approving the General Appropriations Act, which is basically a law with regards to government purchases or the budget for the national government and the local governments, of course, for the coming year. So public administration is basically both a practice and an academic discipline. and the forerunner is Woodrow Wilson in his seminal work, The Study of Administration, which opened public administration formally as a field of study. So the field of administration is the field of business. The object of administrative study is to rescue executive methods from the confusion and costliness of empirical experiment and set them upon foundation laid deep in stable principle. Public administration is the detailed and systematic execution of public law, and every particular application of general law is an act of administration. Okay. It is no surprise, of course, that while this was an academic endeavor, he would later on become a president of the United States in the early 20th century. Okay. And public administration both simplifies and explains the workings of government, particularly the executive branch. It is both an art and a science, where it is a science in that it should be evidence based. Okay, there should be um, there should be data, there should be documentation on what works and what doesn't work in governance. And it should be art in that it should be exciting, it should move people, it should inspire people, it should appeal to the sentiment of the public if you want them to adhere to a certain direction with which you want to govern them. So, in a sense, public administration is like medicine. And just as the father of modern pathology once said, medicine is a social science and politics is nothing else but medicine on a large scale. Medicine as a social science, as a science of human beings, has the obligation to point out problems and to attempt their theoretical solution. The politician, the practical anthropologist, must find the means for their actual solution. Administration is basically where politics, economics, business administration, social welfare, and healthcare, okay, uh, intersect with each other, okay. And I will be giving this lecture simultaneously with a health economics lecture, so there are a lot of things um, that should overlap with these two lectures. So, public health administration is basically what the government does and should do in the health sector and should do it in the most optimized way in terms of budget and resources. And who says that it is optimized? The health economists. Okay, so this is related to the lecture on health economics. So let's talk about the difference between leadership versus management versus administration. So leadership is mostly held by a vision of what we can be, inspiration, and passion. Okay, and with this, it has the large potential, and it always will lead to burnout. And it can also be twisted and redirected, and it is dependent on who is in power, on who has been elected. It determines the direction of where an organization is headed. So leadership is usually, again, our elected officials. Meanwhile, management is basically the capacity to do resource allocation, to execute orders from the leaders, and to know to basically keep in mind the performance indicators, outcomes, and the results from such execution. So management makes things happen that the leaders envision. So where does that lead administration? Okay, so administration is obsessed with the process, the procedures, and the efficiency. It has to it has to basically ensure that operations are smooth and uninterrupted. So an example of this would be before it became privatized, our electric grid. Okay, so our electric grid, well, technically not privatized, but before it was given to electric producers. Okay, the electric grid, you have to ensure that it is continuous, it's uninterrupted, especially in areas where there is a lot of commerce and industry. Okay, so a good health administration is basically a very well-oiled bureaucratic machine that is peopled with dedicated civil servants. So additionally, administration ensures that the core values and the processes of the organization are not lost in this journey of ensuring, again, smooth and uninterrupted operations. So before we move to the next part of the lecture, uh, one of the key exemplars of an effective health administration is none other than our neighbor, the government of Thailand, that despite having two coups d'etats in 20 years, there were no disruptions in health services. Okay? It is because the political leadership is effectively insulated from the civil service. So the civil service, the bureaucracy, continues to function despite problems with the political leadership. And the Philippines ideally should be like that. Okay, but within the past 20 years, we have not had any significant crises in leadership that has tested whether we have the same kind of health administration. So, remember when we talked about the difference between leadership, management, and administration? The functions of management include the planning, the organizing, and the staffing pattern. It is also in charge of directing and controlling the operations of the organization. Alternatively, management, again, planning, organizing, directing. It is also in charge of coordinating between different units within and outside of the organization for monitoring and evaluation of the various operations. Okay, so it is in charge of noting the indicators and the performance of each and every member of the organization, as well as the organization in itself. Okay, and to simplify this further, the functions of management are basically manpower or human resources, materials through resource allocation, money through finance and the budget. Where do we get the money and where do we put the money? And the methods, so the processes, and the mission, the core values or identity. Okay, so these are the five M's of management. There are three levels to management. You have your ground level, the frontline supervisors. Basically, they still do the dirty work together with the people they are supervising. So they're there in the daily operations. They still do the footwork. And then there will come a time that they will be promoted to become middle management, and they are in charge of programs. They become division chiefs. Okay, and then if they are competent enough, they might allegedly or ideally be promoted to the C-suite. Okay, so the chief suite, the top level management, okay, upper management, where they determine the direction that a company, a corporation, or an organization is going. So this is the executive and management committee. So in the case of the Philippines and its health administration, this is the Department of Health, which is composed of the executive committee, the secretary, the undersecretary, and the assistant secretary, while the management committee is composed of the directors of the various bureaus. Okay, so these people are in charge of the policies and some of the regulations. Okay,
So with health administration, there is multiple schools of thought regarding its functions, and because it is both an art and a science, there is no single framework regarding the pillars of public administration. Some say there are four, some others say there are five, and yet there is another source that says six. So I'm not going to ask you to memorize that because these are not hard and fast rules. There is, however, a model I personally prefer. This is the model called the control knobs of health reform by Roberts and others that was first proposed in 2004. And the understanding here is that if you want to encourage something, a certain change or a reform, as a health administrator, you just have to toggle one of five knobs, either the financing knob, the payment knob, the organization knob, the behavior knob, or the regulation knob. We will talk about each and every single one of these knobs in the next few slides. So let's start with the finance knob. And the finance knob is specifically about how the health administration generates revenue, whether it is through taxes such as your capital gains tax, your income taxes, your property taxes, your sales tax, or your excise taxes on the sale of certain products, or corporate taxes. With regards to our health services, you could also generate revenue, okay, through processing fees, such as your blood services, which recently had an update, okay, with how much blood products or blood components, the processing fees for them are supposed to cost. You have your excise taxes on tobacco and alcoholic products, known as the sin taxes. And then for private or pay patients in government hospitals, they pay an extra for being in their own solo room, for having their own separate set of health workers uh, for their medical care. And then for the government health services, another aspect is the renting of assets. A lot of our national agencies, including the health agency, has land that is under them that they can rent out to the private sector for to generate revenue. Then you have your payment knob, and the payment knob is basically where the money goes. Do you use the money to procure materials, assets, infrastructure, vehicles, reagents, maintain these very said machines, the infrastructure to repair and rehabilitate them, uh, to pay for supplies, okay, consumables, and how much, on the other hand, goes to your salaries and the training of your career career health workers, to train them in being career and profession, and to develop their profession as government health workers. Now you might think that with those two knobs and considering how much income is generated, how much revenue is generated by our government, it should solve already a lot of our problems. Okay, but the main limiting factor, of course, is our budget cycle and health. So, for example, in 2024, they noticed a certain trend with regards to an emerging infectious disease, let's say Mpox. Okay, so they want to address the threat of Mpox and this is 2024. So they have to make a proposal, a budget proposal that has to be approved in Congress, in the both lower and upper houses of Congress in September to October. Sometimes it stretches until December of that same year, okay, of that same year, so that it can be ideally enacted in 2025. But then you still have to go through, once the budget is approved, the appropriations, the cycle of appropriations and procurement. Okay, so the bidding cycle, the bidding process, which will take sometimes weeks, sometimes even months, until they can procure it ideally before the second quarter, sometimes as late as the fourth quarter when they procure the items for that before they can address the noted health problem in 2024, and then they can only act on it in maybe early 2026. So in the end, sometimes it all boils down to where the public invests its resources, and the budget cycle is prepared during the current fiscal year, where it is then passed into law as the General Appropriations Act for the following fiscal year. And then the execution is to the procurement of items needed for it, as well as the operations. And then accountability is done through monitoring and evaluation, audits, and the program review. There are three components to the health budget. You have your capital outlay, you have your maintenance and other operating expenses, and you have your personnel services. Okay. In the next slide, let's talk about each and every single one of these. So for your capital outlay or infrastructure, this refers specifically to construction and repair of the construction and repair of your infrastructure for the purchase or procurement of vehicles and machines, and the maintenance of these, preventive maintenance of these machines and these vehicles. Okay, if it exceeds 50,000 pesos in price, okay, for the bidding, this is already part of your capital outlay. So remember, when they passed the General Appropriations Act, the budget for each agency is divided into three: capital outlay, the MOE or the maintenance and other operating expenses, and personnel services. So capital outlay, procurement of hard equipment, of vehicles, of machines, uh, buying of land, possibly buying of properties, possibly uh, even paying for rent if the agency is renting certain locations. Okay, remember, anything more than 50,000 pesos, okay, at any single time, okay, is considered capital outlay. Meanwhile, maintenance and other operating expenses include your personnel training, your reagents, your supplies, your drugs, your utilities. So the supplies, they have to be kept at a certain price so that they are not considered capital outlay. Okay, so unit price. Okay, as the same with drugs, utilities, programs, and projects. And it also pays for people who are not considered employees but affiliated with the health agencies, such as your consultants, your job order, and your contract of service personnel. There is a delineation between the two, where job order personnel usually can exceed 6 months, while contract of service are for a specific program and usually renewed every 6 months. And then your last of your component of the health budget is your personnel services, and they are specifically about the salaries and bonuses of both your regular and contractual personnel, which is different from contract of service personnel. Okay, so there's contract of service; they are not employees, contractual personnel are employees of the health agency, of the National Health Agency, and yeah, they are considered employees, whether part-time or full-time, and they receive the bonuses, and they are taxed accordingly, and their the budget for their salary comes from personnel services. Next, we have our organization knob, or how the health system is structured, as well as the processes with regards to how the health system operates. Okay, so your national government agency has attached agencies to it, including the Food and Drug Administration. Uh, technically, technically, the Bureau of Quarantine is an attached agency. Okay, and then the government-owned corporations, the GOCCs, such as PhilHealth, is under the National Government Agency. Okay. Meanwhile, the local government units, which according to the Local Government Unit Code of 1991, should be the frontline, ideally should be the frontline health service provider on the government side. You have your provincial health office and your municipal slash city health office. Okay. And then you have your private sector and your other participants. Okay, so your private sector, it's outside of the scope of this it's outside of the scope of this lecture. But for your other participants, this includes your state universities that have their own healthcare facilities, such as West Visayas State University Medical Center, or the Philippine General Hospital, which is under the University of the Philippines system. Other participants with regards to the organization of the health administration, of course, is your Department of National Defense, which has two major hospitals that you know of that you can go to internship in, such as Veterans Memorial Medical Center in North Avenue, and the AFP Medical Center in Viluna Avenue, both of which are in Quezon City. So there are three types of organizational charts. You have your structural chart, you have your functional chart, and you have your position chart. Okay. The types of organizational charts are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes they're a blend of the two. Sometimes there's a mix of the functional chart and a position chart, which shows who has a higher rank and who does what. Sometimes the position and the structural chart are also combined because it shows which agency and who's heading that agency. So the position and the position and the structure. Okay, and sometimes you have your structural and functional chart. So you have both the functions and the organizations or sub-organizations within an agency that operate and what they do. Okay, so I would love to show you the current organizational chart of the Department of Health, but because the Department of um, uh, but because it is only recently that procurement for Amazon Web Services has been conducted by the Department of Informations and Communications Technology has been done and is only currently moving forward. Certain pages within the homepage of the Department of Health are currently inaccessible at this time. So this is actually one from the previous year, from 2025, which is the current organizational chart of the Department of Health. And unfortunately, some of the names here are no longer actually no longer undersecretaries or assistant secretaries in the Department of Health. Okay, and I will not be asking this as in your exam. Okay. One thing about the Philippine health system that I touched upon in the previous slides that I will elaborate is the concept of decentralization slash devolution, which was basically enacted through Republic Act 7160 or the Local Government Code of 1991, where local health offices were transferred back to the local government units. This happened after the after the People Power Revolution, after the uh, codification of the 1987 Constitution. Okay, a lot of authoritarian regimes, they tend to centralize authority. Okay, they want almost every single civil servant, almost every unit to be directly answerable the to whoever is in power. In this case, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Okay, and there was a movie in the previous Metro Manila Film Festival, Manila's Finest, where this shift from a police force under the mayor of the city of Manila, so the police department then of Manila, versus the Philippine Constabulary, which was a nationalized slash centralized police force. Okay, so ideally, with the Local Government Code of 1991, responsibility for frontline services should be transferred more and more to the local government units. So the provincial health office, the city health offices, and the municipal health offices. And yeah, that's why the provincial, city, and municipal health officers, as well as your public health nurses, dentists, and midwives, are now directly answerable to whoever their local chief executive is, whether it's the governor or the city or municipal mayor. Certain hospitals also, not all, okay. Some provincial hospitals, such as say the Marinduque Provincial Hospital or the Occidental Mindoro Provincial Hospital, they are under the local government unit of their respective provinces. Okay? Hospital ng Makati and Hospital ng Maynila are examples of hospitals that are under the local government of their respective Metro Manila cities. Okay? But there are still hospitals that are giving frontline services that are under the National Health Agency. So, automatically, what comes to mind are East Avenue Medical Center, which is a DOH Medical Center, Amang Rodriguez Memorial Medical Center, another DOH Medical Center in Marikina City, Hospital ng Palawan, which despite the name isn't under the local government unit or the province of Palawan. Okay. Another complication to this, but not really a complication, but something that should make things interesting for the carrying out of health services is the Mandanas Garcia ruling of 2018, where the Supreme Court rulings on two different cases, once filed by Congressman Mandanas versus Executive Secretary Paquito N. Ochoa. So this was back in during the time of former President Noynoy Aquino and Congressman Enrique T. Garcia. Basically, the ruling was that there should be higher internal revenue allotment shares for the local government units by the national government. So not just the national internal revenue, but national taxes such as through the customs and other collecting agencies. So consider your finance knob, should directly go to the local government units so that they can carry out, ideally, the frontline services that they should be carrying out. So the implications of these health services need to be further devolved into the LGUs, especially in the light of the Universal Healthcare Act. Now, we haven't seen any massive shifts since 2018, but one of the things we in the public health sphere were expecting more devolution. So basically, certain hospitals or medical centers under the National Health Agency would be given to the provincial health offices to the local government units. Like for example, it was expected, it still hasn't happened, that the hospital ng Palawan would now be under the Palawan local government unit. Okay, and we expect, again, because of this Supreme Court ruling, the transformation of the health system, with the DOH mainly coordinating, making policies, and being a regulatory body rather than dealing in health services itself. While in terms of our levels of healthcare for the organization knob, you have your primary, secondary, and tertiary, or levels one, two, three of our care. So you have your health centers, your rural health units. Sometimes there are cities where the city health office also does frontline care. Okay, or the municipal health office does frontline care, and then you have your Bukas Center for your urgent care. Okay, this was proposed, the main proponent being Secretary Ted Herbosa, and then once a certain case or a certain health problem can no longer be managed at the primary level, it goes into secondary care, where it is seen by your district, municipal, and some of your provincial hospitals. Okay, and then if it needs subspecialty care, it then goes to your medical centers and your specialty centers, whether these are under certain LGUs, because some LGUs have the highest level of medical care uh, available, such as Hospital na Makati, or your National Health Agency medical centers, or even your uh, state university medical centers. Okay. So now that we're done with the organizational knob, let's go to the behavior knob. And the behavior knob is all about incentivizing or punishing uh, desired behaviors or unwanted behaviors, respectively. So consider the following as a health administrator. How are you going to incentivize people not vaping, or punish or penalize people who are vaping, okay, without making it a criminal act? Because again, criminalizing actually leads to avoidance and defiant behaviors, okay? Also consider, as a future health administrator, how do you deal with health worker migration? I will be talking, or I have talked about this depending on which one you watched first, in my health economics lecture. Okay? And then in your behavior knob as a health administrator, how do you handle the toxic behaviors in medical training? And I was wondering why I didn't talk about regulations or legislation or laws. And then I remembered it's going to be talked about in the control knobs under the regulation knob. Okay. So with regards to how rules are set within our health system, there are several levels of legislation. We discussed the Constitution, which is our social contract to each other, why the government has a responsibility, why we have a responsibility as a citizen of the Philippines, and how we are going to carry out these responsibilities within the framework of the Constitution. And then you have your Supreme Court rulings, which are direct interpretations of the Constitution as well as of laws that have been passed, which should be within the bounds of our Constitution. Then you have judiciary rulings, okay, slightly under that. And then you have your Republic Acts or laws that should not be, first and foremost, unconstitutional. Okay? And then when there is an emergency, such as, for example, um, a new disease that threatens to become a pandemic, okay, uh, a shortcut can be done where there is an order, an executive order, or even which comes from the office of the president with regards to rules on how we are going to deal with the new disease, how we're going to address it while we wait for an actual Republic Act on how to deal with the disease in general. Because again, the executive should have limited powers. Again, the three branches of the government, the executive shouldn't be the ones making laws. So the executive orders have limits on their applicability. And then the DOH, especially the health secretary, being the alter ego of the president of the Philippines, can also issue regulations in the form of administrative orders, including the administrative order regarding the maximum prices of processing fees for certain blood components. That's an administrative order, that is a regulation. And ideally, you can do this quickly enough or faster compared to Republic Acts or laws, which have to go through multiple readings, which have to go through various committees for approval before it gets elevated from the lower house to the upper house. And then sometimes if a bicameral committee is needed before it goes to the president to be signed into an actual law. And with that, we are done with our control knobs with regards to health administration. So we have our intermediate indicators for our health administration. Do we have efficiency? Is there technical versus allocative efficiency? Technical efficiency means is it doing what it's supposed to do at the optimal with resources being optimized, versus the allocative efficiency where it addresses those who have less, okay, those who are marginalized. And then you have your access, which is both physical access, so those who need it to are they able to access the healthcare services, versus effective access, which is yes, it's available, but can people in geographically isolated or disadvantaged areas really access these healthcare services? And of course, there is your quality. And then your long-term indicators and goals for healthcare reform as a health administrator includes your health status outcomes, customer satisfaction, and risk protection, particularly for the whole of the population. Okay, and these are the sources that I used for this lecture. Thank you very much. See you at the question and answer / synchronous session. All right.